On revenues, we know we have stopped the hemorrhaging of the system and begun the process of rebuilding its solvency in a tangible way.
Leading the effort to rebuild the system is new GERS Administrator Angel Dawson Jr., who was selected last year to replace Austin Nibbs, who retired in September after heading GERS since 2007. Dawson, a former Commissioner of Finance and Executive Director of the Public Finance Authority, will draw on his extensive experience in finance and commercial banking to further stabilize and strengthen the system, according to the GERS board.
I move that the GRS restart the personal loan program.
At its monthly meeting on January 25th, the GERS Board of Trustees voted unanimously to restart a limited version of its personal loan program now that the system's liquidity has improved. Active members of the GERS will be able to apply for personal loans by April 30th with the board's authorization for the program set to expire on December 31st. Joining me on the set for an in-depth discussion on the government employees retirement system is the new administrator, Mr. Angel Dawson Jr. Welcome to Comes with the Territory.
Thank you, Leslie. It's great to be here.
Glad to have you here. So let's start off with a basic, give me a 30-second overview of exactly what the GERS system is and how important it is to retirees in the territory.
Well, simply, the GERS is a defined benefit pension system. Meaning that unlike a defined contribution program where you don't know what your retirement benefit will be over the course of time, your benefit is defined in the law and in the policies of the GERS. And it's very important to some 8,700 retirees that we have presently, and as a pillar of the Virgin Islands community at this time.
Well, a lot of individuals in the community are excited about your leadership of the system. We know the wealth of experience that you bring to the table. But what has gotten us to the point where we need someone like you to help rescue the system? And you saw the piece we just aired about the ailments that the system has had over several decades. It is now a period of rebuilding, fixing the problem. But let's talk about, before we fix and heal, what led to the issues that the system was experiencing that cause for the legislation and the actions that had to be passed in order to stop hemorrhaging?
Well, there are a number of factors. Let me share a couple numbers with you right off the top. $1.6 billion, which was the amount of assets, liquid assets, that the GERS held in 2007, and $400 million, which is the amount that the GERS held at the end of 2021. Went from $1.6 billion to $400 million. And as the governor indicated in his lead-in piece that was played, we were a couple of years away from insolvency.
Yeah.
If you consider the fact that the annual payroll of the GERS in terms of payments to retirees is approximately $240 million. $400 million means that you are less than 2 years away from not being able to pay retirees. And what led up to that was we have a very generous pension system.
Absolutely.
There were actually some, shall I say, questionable
policy. Let's be frank. There was moves that were made by the legislature. I think some that more or less pandered to voters that were in the best interest of politics versus actual sound financial policy.
Indeed. Thank you for saying that and sparing me having to say it.
You don't have to get in trouble. That's all right.
But I think the major factor that we've had that contributed in addition to those is the fact that we've had an increasing number of retirees in comparison to the number of active employees. Presently, we have about 9,000 active employees, and that's not just the central government. That includes semi-autonomous agencies and 8,700 retirees. So it's essentially one-to-one, one active employee per retiree, which is not sustainable. There's a time that there was probably 5 employees to every retiree. So as you can see, the math has worked against us over time.
So let's talk about your plans to help fix the system and your vision for the challenges that the system is currently experiencing.
Well, we have to collect the funding note, the special purpose vehicle that the governor referred to presently because of the issues surrounding the cover over. we received 124 million versus 158 million that we were slated to receive in fiscal year 2024, which is the current fiscal year. So we're about $34 million short. I'm assured, based on discussions with the executive as well as with the delegate to Congress, that there's some optimism, there's still hope that the extender will be passed by the Congress. But we all realize the serious dysfunction that is happening in Washington at this time. So we don't know when, but we remain hopeful that we'll receive those monies retroactively. We did receive the first full payment of $158 million in 2023. In 2022 rather, so we remain hopeful. But even if we were to receive all of the monies on the schedule that has been indicated in the special purpose vehicle, because of how the payments are structured, they're backloaded. That is, more than half of the $3.8 billion that is pledged by the funding note comes in the back half of the transaction. Therefore, it's projected that it is possible that between 2037 and 2038, the GERS will become insolvent on a temporary basis. Of course, a lot of that is conditioned on how we do with the markets, because presently, I indicated a short while ago that we had, at the end of 2021, $400 million in liquid assets. Well, we have now increased that over the last 2 years by $146 million. We're presently at $546 million, which is a promising sign, is a green shoot, indicating that the funds that we've received and the way that the markets have been performing recently, we've been earning somewhere between 9 and 10% on our portfolio. So imagine if we had the other $34 million that we didn't get, how much more we would have earned.
Sure.
So we're making prudent investments and we're seeing the returns. And that is why, in a short period of time, we've had a 37% increase in our assets. We need to do that many times over to get back to where we need to be. And while we're moving in the right direction, there's some other figures I'd like to share. And one of them is $4 billion, okay? And that's $4 billion that I refer to is the accrued actuarial liability of the system. And that is, if we were to cease operations today and have to pay the members for their projected lifespan, we would need $4 billion. Well, we have $546 billion, okay? And we had 400 million. So our funded percentage is somewhere around 10%, which is dismal, okay? But we're moving it in the right direction, but it's a super tanker. You don't turn it on a dime. You have to take time. It takes time to turn. It's beginning to turn, and we have to continue doing the right things. And importantly, we have to not do any wrong things.
Correct. So let's talk about how the system's money is handled. Folks know that they get a check every 2 weeks. There's money taken out for the GERS. They're crossing their fingers that when they go to retire, the money is there. But who in the interim, between your contribution every payday and when you finally get to access money from the system, who's handling our money and how is it invested?
Well, for the most part, we're investing in index funds. We're about 65% invested in equities and 35% in fixed income bonds. And that has worked well for us. It's a very conservative approach that has served us well.
Is there any leeway that the board has to make decisions to say, like, given the position that we're in, and I know it's a very tenuous situation. You just mentioned our overall funded liability being at 10%, but are there means for us to get more aggressive with our investment? I know one of the criticisms, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but one of the criticisms, and people blame some prior poor investment by this poor investments locally by the systems as being one of the reasons why the system's health is the way it is. I think if you were to do the math, some of those investments are just a drop in the bucket in the overall picture, realistically. But still, there's a lot of sentiment that is attached and emotions attached to seeing investors not pay the system back for loans that have been made, failed businesses, et cetera. What leeway does the board have to change that mix of investment that we currently have?
They have some leeway, but before I address that head on, I would indicate that even though the alternative investments, as we call them, and two notable examples of that were Carambola Resort in St. Croix and West Bay Supermarket, I must indicate that even though they were challenged, the GERS did recover all of its
And
principal.
I'm glad you brought that up because
Yes.
that's a fact that a lot of people in having the conversation is not aware of.
Right. That is absolutely a fact. So that's history. In terms of current alternative investments, the most significant one that we have that just about everyone would be familiar with is a Havenside Mall, which is going through a very exciting period. Let me make it clear that the GERS is not building a hotel at Havenside Mall. We have leased some property, some land, to a developer who has a successful track record, who is presently building a Hampton by Hilton 126-room property, occupying some 5 floors. We're very excited by it. We will benefit financially from it in terms of guaranteed minimum payments, as well as a percentage of gross revenue moving forward. So that is, in fact, a good development for the GERS. But beyond that, we're looking at, while the mall is doing well, we believe that it can do even better. So we're in the process of reimagining the mall.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we've engaged a company by the name of Ideas out of Florida, whose principals are former executives of Disney Corporation.
Sure.
And we really want to migrate it from just being shopping to being a destination, shopping, retail, dining, entertainment. So we're very much engaged in that presently. We're also going to create a community gathering place. If you have been to the mall recently, as you drive down what we call Main Street, which is between buildings 1 and 2 as you enter.
Yeah, or the Miracle Mile.
At the end of that, there used to be some ugly, nondescript warehouses.
Yeah.
Well, if you've been there recently, you'll notice that they're gone. And while it's presently occupied by construction material, what have you, that is going to transform into a green space. We're going to, well, I'm calling it for the time being Coal Women's Park.
Oh.
Because we're going to be paying tribute to the historical figures known as the coal women, who played a central role in the shipping industry
Absolutely.
in St. Thomas in particular in the early late 1800s, early 1900s as well. So we're very excited about that. We plan to have a place that local vendors can go and sell their wares, because we want to keep more tourists within the mall as well as locals. So
Well, I'm glad to hear that development. Queen Keziah and crew is going to have some honors coming to them. Let's talk about the personal loan system. That's also a big feature that, again, lifeline for a lot of Virgin Islanders. You know, I'm not a government employee, and I've only served in short stints as a government employee. But a lot of people talk about the loan program because of the system's health. It was taken away recently, voted to be reinstated again, and it's coming back. Let's talk about on a limited basis. So let's share with the community how the loan program is going to work going forward.
First of all, I advocated for the program. I don't have a vote. I'm not a board member. I follow the dictates of the board. But just a little anecdote, I hadn't even yet occupied my office. I think it was the Saturday after my nomination was announced, and I went to Home Depot. I don't think I made it 5 feet.
With my loan!
Exactly. When I was approached by several individuals, very pleasantly with regards to the restart of the loan program. So I'm happy that we're at a point where we're working and getting the loan program back up on a limited basis, because it really is a help to a number of individuals.
Absolutely.
Who miss the loan program. And frankly, it's a good investment for the GERS.
The financial track record of the program is good.
We're not just being altruistic here. We are actually making a good investment, because the interest rate that will be charged is 8%. And that's a guaranteed 8%. And it's secured, because it's secured by the active members' retirement contributions. The limited program is going to allow loans up to $10,000. If you're an active employee with 2 years of service. It will be a maximum of 75% of your contributions, or $10,000, whichever is less. And it's been approved in terms of funding to the amount of $20 million. $10 million for the District of St. Croix, and $10 million for the district of St. Thomas, St. John. Now, do the math. We have 9,000 active employees, and if everybody qualified for a $10,000 loan, that means that everybody isn't going to be able to get a loan.
Sure.
So that is the reality. Now, of course, some people may apply for less, so we don't know the exact number of loans that we'll be able to accommodate. But we are going to be putting in place a very orderly system to ensure that scenes from the past that I understand have occurred, where people have been out from 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, if not earlier, to qualify for a loan once the program starts. Because it was an annual restart to the program, that we handle this in a very professional manner, okay? Now, the program is not reauthorized permanently. It will be reviewed every October by the board to determine whether it will be reapproved for the next calendar year. And that'll be based upon our investment performance, financial standing, what have you. So hopefully we continue to do well, and we are able to continue the program and maybe make it more than a limited program.
Let's talk real quickly, because we only have about one and a half minutes left. Other plans for infusion of cash into the system? Have you envisioned any other ways other than the special purpose vehicle and government contributions to get money into the system?
Well, both of those are very important, but there are other areas that we're looking at. One of the things that disturbs me a bit is that we have a significant amount of land holdings in St. Thomas and St. Croix. We have 170 acres in Coakley Bay, St. Croix, and 130 acres at Hoffman Nulleberg in St. Thomas, which is on off of Weymouth-Rymouth Highway. And those are non-performing assets. They're not earning us anything. So in terms of plans for 2024, we're doing a number of things. I've already done a reorganization in terms of personnel within the GERS. We're also in the process of upgrading our benefit system and a number of other initiatives. But as soon as I'm done getting the loan program stood back up, I'll be turning my attention, along with the development committee, to development of these properties, whether it means a public-private partnership with a qualified developer, or something that will benefit our members in terms of housing, which is very much needed in the territory at this time, but in a way that will be of financial benefit to the system. Okay?
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Our time is up. When you're having fun, it goes quickly. But I'd love to have you back on the show, because this is an issue that's very important to the community. Up next, we'll hear from this week's panel. But first, let's take a look at the topics on the table. In 1946, Arthur Fairchild envisioned Magens Bay as a treasured public space for all Virgin Islanders. He donated 56 acres of his land, including the beach, with the express desire that it be maintained as a public park used for the people of the Virgin Islands in perpetuity. However, recent tensions are brewing between the Magens Bay Authority and local residents who believe Fairchild's wishes are being neglected. At a recent board meeting, reported by the St. Thomas source, residents voiced their concerns about the increased focus on attracting tourists, potentially at the expense of serving the local community. They criticized the use of velvet ropes and reserved signs seemingly sectioning off parts of the beach for specific visitors. This practice, they argue, contradicts Fairchild's vision of inclusivity. Residents also decried the presence of yachts anchoring in the bay, viewing them as an affront to the local population. Additionally, the lack of local food options at the concession stand sparks complaints, further highlighting the perceived prioritization of tourist preferences over local needs. On a recent weekday visit, Magens Bay Beach buzzed with hundreds of tourists, some commenting on the concessions offerings.
There's great options for food at the concessions for tourists, especially families with kids who want just a pizza or a hamburger. There's great variety in that sense. So yeah, I think it's great. I think I would like to get more local fare, but I think after the beach we'll go somewhere local.
My personal opinion on the options at the concession stand are add more local. I think Johnny Cakes would be great.
We try to offer as much as we can on a local perspective in terms of utilizing local ingredients. You know, whether it's guava, mango, ginger, cilantro, any fresh greens, local mahi, those sorts of things. But quite honestly, we don't have the market for things that I love. A good fried fish and fungi, you know, a good butter, you know, full of butter with conch, you know, a good oxtail. Those are the things that, to be very honest with you, the requests are, it's not in high demand. Because if you look around today, you'll see we are full of tourists, and that is not really what the tourists come to the beach for.
A lifeguard defended the practice of renting beach chairs, citing the need to accommodate the tourist influx.
You have to have accommodations for the tourists that come to visit the island. And part of the problem now is the cruise ships come in bigger and bigger, with the newest ships coming in with 7,000 passengers. And if you can't make accommodation for them, the cruise lines will simply take their passengers to their own private islands, and you won't see them here. So, in short, I think we need them, and it's a good idea to have them.
The debate highlights the delicate balance between fostering tourism and upholding the original intent of public spaces. Finding a solution that represents Fairchild's vision while catering to the needs of all stakeholders remains a crucial challenge for the Magens Bay Authority.
Certainly, it's a complicated matter, but this vote of no confidence is the right thing to do and the right step to take for the people of the Virgin Islands.
On May 5, 2022, the British Virgin Islands House of Assembly unanimously approved a vote of no confidence against Andrew Foy, stripping him of his official position as the BVI's premier following his arrest in Miami a week earlier on drug charges. Fast forward to 2024, and Foy now faces up to life in prison after a Miami federal jury found him guilty of conspiring to smuggle Colombian cocaine through the BVI in exchange for millions of dollars. Foy has been locked up since the February 8th verdict as a federal judge tries to resolve doubts raised by 2 jurors after the guilty verdicts. According to the Miami Herald, the judge polled each of the jurors after the verdict, and they all confirmed Foy's guilt. But shortly after they were officially let go, 2 jurors contacted the judge to say they had apparent misgivings about their verdicts, setting the stage for a rare post-trial dispute. On February 20th, the judge ordered federal prosecutors and defense attorneys to return to court on March 7th with a potential legal solution to the problem, according to the Miami Herald. Foy's sentencing is set for April 29th, the newspaper reports. Joining our panel for this episode, let's welcome criminal defense attorney Melanie Turnbull, former Senator Dr. Ruby Simmons-Isanison, and St. Thomas resident Malachi Thomas. It's great to have you all here. I'm going to start with you, Malachi. We just had an interview with the new administrator of the GRS system, and you recently did a well-written piece to the St. Thomas Source about ideas you have about how we can help to revamp, heal, and actually put more wealth in Virgin Islanders' pockets that are employees of the government that are currently investing in the system. Let's talk about the main tenets of your letter to the editor.
Yeah. So main tenets are we need to convert the retirement system from a defined benefit system to a defined contribution system.
And let's just briefly, for people listening to these terms, because we try to break things down. Defined benefits tells us what you're going to get. When you say defined contributions, explain to the viewers exactly what that means.
So that's one way to define it. Defined benefit could also be characterized as an employee contributing a percentage of their income into the system. The government or entity, whichever, could match that contribution, but the growth on those contributions, the investment growth on those contributions, don't belong to the individual,
Yeah.
they belong to the system. So the entity, in this case, the government, takes on the risk of having to fund the retirees' income until they pass. Under a defined contribution system, that risk would be reallocated to the individual.
Exactly.
There are some benefits to it: mobility, ownership of the growth on investment. And one of my main points is the ability for the individual to pass on assets to their loved ones. Currently, when a retiree passes away, there is nothing to pass on in terms of their retirement benefit.
Except for the death benefit, that it can be passed on to the family.
Death benefit, but what's the amount?
It's not
of
significant. It's not life-changing. It's not something you're going to build, your future off of.
Right, and so in my proposal, I consider that the government, right now the government matches 23.5% of the employee's income into the system. So I propose, and this is just a proposal, right? There needs to be actuarial and financial advisors who advise on this type of transition. But I propose that the government match up to 10%, which would decrease the percentage by 13.5%. And with an employee and a contribution like that, over an employee for 30 years, 35 years, the growth on investment could, let's say it's a $300,000 contribution, right? Or $600,000 contribution. At the employee's point of retirement, those contributions could be worth up to $2.5–3.5 million, which, if they distribute the 4% recommended distribution, they could have $2.5 million. I think that's maybe $80,000 to $95,000 a year for the rest of their life. Which means when they die, instead, I don't know what the number on the retirement benefit is. I'm sure it's not $1.5 million.
No,
right?
It's not.
So and I don't know in terms of how the system is organized by law and executed. Those benefits wouldn't be caught up in probate.
Now, one of the things you mentioned, the types of account, you mentioned 403 and 403B Roth accounts that would be utilized in this model that you're talking about. Share with the viewers the benefits of those accounts. And then I also want to talk about the risk, because you're talking to somebody that was Series 7 licensed with American Express. So I get this financial discussion really, really well. Talk about the benefits of those types of accounts. And let's talk about the risks that the investor would then take on, because in theory, it all sounds great when you have people investing money and doing things like ETFs and safer, more conservative investments. But when there's a market downturn and you don't have the robust type of returns, what happens? What protections or safety nets are there for investors at that point?
So Mr. Dawson said that their investment allocation is 65% equities and 35% bonds, right? That would work for someone who is maybe 50 years and older, who's nearing retirement. For somebody like me, an employee that's younger, I want 100% allocation in equities. And in 20 years...
Well, no financial advisor would tell you to do that.
No, but I think, some would say 95%. Actually, if you look at the majority of target date index funds on the market, for people whose retirement outlook is 30, 35, 40 years into the future, the allocation is like 95 to 99% allocation in equties. So I think, I hear your point of if there's a downturn, but since the 50s, the S&P 500 has maintained
a 7%
I think the average
return.
is 10.2% since the 50s on average growth.
No, it's more like 7.
It's 10.2. We could Google it. It's 10.2 average, the S&P 500, right? I think it's a risk that most individuals will take on. Now, this is, in terms of retirement, right? This is where it becomes tricky, is when the individual decides to retire. So for instance, we could take 2008, right? If I was considering to retire under this type of system, if I was considering to retire in 2008, and it happened, then I would sit back and say, okay, if I retire and this was the effect to my account, whether
It wasn't the right time to retire.
no, by then the allocation would be different, right? But you would have to, so the risk is having to change when you decide to retire. But also with that, the market returned to pre-2008 levels within 2-3 years. I want to say by 2012, the S&P 500 passed where it was before the dip in 2008. So I think the benefits of the system outweigh the risk.
The market returned, but the economy didn't for the average American. And that's what you have to look at. The amount of people that lost their homes. You know, my husband, for instance, I could tell you from a personal perspective, when we evaluate what was lost, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars that did not return to the 3 years afterwards. In fact, it took a longer period of time.
Did you
And
sell?
I think if you take, no, of course not.
Okay.
But if you talk to the average person that had money in the market then, I personally know people that I remember having a conversation in Windward Passage with somebody in California, a good friend of mine, who in a couple of months had lost millions of dollars in their retirement account, and retiring at that point was not an option. Dr. Simmons-Isanison, you're a retiree. What do you think about the current health of the system, the steps that have been taken, the special purpose vehicle that's been introduced by Governor Bryan and his administration? How do you think the system is handling its current health right now?
Well, I think like many retirees, I was happy when the legislature passed the measure proposed by the governor, because now we know that there is the possibility that we will have our retirement funds for at least for a while going forward. There was a point there when I think we were all very nervous about what was going to happen, because it's difficult to live on Social Security alone. Some of us were thinking that we might have to go back to work. So I think where we are now is good. And listening to Director Dawson, I was pleased to hear some of the things that he was talking about in terms of plans for the future. I know he said that probably in 2037 or 38, the system might be insolvent.
Yes.
But let's hope that that doesn't happen, because that's going to be another panic, and hopefully I'll still be around at that time, you know. But they've got some good ideas, and I particularly like what they're talking about doing with the coal women, because, you know, I've been involved with the dollar for dollar celebration of the
Every
coal
year,
women.
yes.
So that's something that I'm looking forward to.
Attorney Turnbull, real briefly, I know you're not a government employee, but we are all connected to a government employee. We either have relatives or friends that we know. What do you see in terms of the future health of the system, and what do you think about Mr. Thomas's idea about personal investment accounts for the system?
I actually enjoyed everything that he had to say, because I don't think a lot of people realize, but I work in the federal government, and in the federal government, you have a lot of control over your contributions, and they also cap their contributions. So the first 3%, it's a match, and then as you go to the 4th and 5th%, it goes to a 0.5% match, and I can log in at any time and control my contributions. And so I tend to agree with the innovation that he is talking about, because I did kind of gasp at the conservative nature of GRS current investments. The 65-35% breakdown sounds kind of alarming to younger people. And I actually took my money out of GRS when I left the government years ago, and I was able to then dump that money into my federal TSP system. And so it is exciting to hear innovative ideas. I'm just concerned about our ability to implement it in time, because it just seems like we keep putting a Band-Aid on the issue.
Dr. Simmons-Isanison, I want to come back to you. Magens Bay Authority, you have been very vocal about some of the issues that are taking place in our package before this segment. We showed some of the challenges, the balance, the delicate balance that has to be maintained out there between entertaining the guests to the territory and also fulfilling the wishes of Mr. Fairchild when he made the donation to the territory of having it be an open space for locals to enjoy in perpetuity. What bothers you right now about your visits to Magens Bay?
I am truly bothered by the fact that there are boats coming right up close to the shore. When I went to the town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago, there was a big yacht. There were 3 yachts, one larger than the others, sitting, very, very close to the swim area. I've seen pictures of boats that have actually come up on the sand into the swim area. And it's just not the boats, but the lounge chairs that they put out every morning at 6 o'clock, because they don't want the tourists to have to drag the chairs down the beach or whatever. But they're taking up, a third of the beach. We were told at the meeting last week that they can put out as many as 375 lounge chairs. So you have those chairs crammed into one area. There's no place to walk. Many people not only go to the beach to swim, but they go to walk, to exercise, especially some older people who want to, stay in good health. And there's no place to walk. You have to go in the water, walk around the chairs. There's no way to get from the beach up to the concession stand. And the bottom line is that it's unsafe, but it's also extremely unsightly. And when I think of what Mr. Fairchild said when he gave that the beach to the people, this is on the Megan's Bay Authority's website, their website. They said that, he said the beach is more than 500 yards long. In his deed of conveyance, Fairchild stipulated that Megan's Bay should be maintained as a public park with its natural beauty preserved. Those chairs take away from the natural beauty of the beach for use by the people of the Virgin Islands in perpetuity without discrimination of any kind as to race, creed, color, or national origin. This unique vision has inspired those charged with its management. If that has inspired them, I don't know how they could agree to having 375 lounge chairs packed into the area that they're packed, because that takes away from the beauty, from the intent of the beach. And, Virgin Islanders like to go to the beach to swim, to party, to enjoy themselves, to relax. Now, the gentleman who has the concession, he said that locals can rent the beach chairs too, but we don't rent beach chairs. It's $10 for a chair. So if I go with,
we're gonna show up with a chair. That's what we do.
Bring our own chair. You bring a blanket. You bring a towel. But if you have 10 people in your group, that's $100 to rent those chairs. If you want chairs for everybody, nobody's gonna spend that kind of money when you pay $2 to go into the beach. So to me, what they're doing is defying the intent of the beach.
So let's talk solutions. How do you think the authority can tackle this issue and meet the demands of the tourist industry and balance the intent of Mr. Fairchild and serve locals appropriately? What can they do to change this dynamic?
The problem we have here in the Virgin Islands is that people who are doing development and earning money put tourists first and the locals second. Think Virgin Islanders first. And then what we're doing should be done to benefit the Virgin Islanders, and the tourists can come and enjoy it. There's nothing saying that, yes, you can rent beach chairs, but have them in an area where they will bring them out when they need them. In fact, there was a young woman at the last board meeting who is affiliated with Cookie Point, and she said what they do is when somebody rents a beach chair at Cookie Point, one of their employees will take the chair where the person wants it.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you're going to take at 6 o'clock in the morning and spread them all out, you're saying that
this is it. This is a space, and
we don't want you here.
Mr. Thomas, your views on this issue?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and I believe in not just a representative government, but a government that's responsive to the people. And we have people here, all right, talking to the Megan's Bay Authority, bringing to light an issue, and the responses that I'm seeing communicates an authority that's not responsive. 375 beach chairs is a lot. I think if they wanted to be accommodating to the people, they could reduce the number to 100 beach chairs. And I also think that we have these types of problems in our community when social institutions start to engage in profit-seeking initiatives. The point of the beach chairs is purely to generate profit.
Revenue, yeah.
I think, I know I heard some of the tourists speaking, and I can't remember who it was, but I don't think a tourist is going to decide not to come back to the Virgin Islands because they went to the beach and couldn't rent a chair. So I think if the people are saying these chairs need to go, it's something that should be an easy decision to make to give up. I don't think the effect on the tourism economy is going to be negative.
Attorney Turnbull, I'm curious to hear what you think about this.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on my two panelists, co-panelists. You asked a question, what is the balance? I don't think there's a balance. I think the people of the Virgin Islands should be the focal point. Yeah. I think the intention by Fairchild himself should be the focal point. So when we're saying these things about whether there should be a balance and how do we weigh the balance, I don't think they should have any chairs. I think they should do exactly what they did at Cokie Point. At Cokie Point, they laid out all the chairs. There was an outcry. They took all of them up, and when you go to Cokie Point, they walk you to your location. Mm-hmm. But just this carte blanche way of putting out all the chairs because that's what the tourists want. I just don't buy it. And I think what happens when you cater to what the tourists want, you Disneyfy every place on the planet for the comfort of tourists, and you then lose your identity and you lose your culture, because what is the universal language of tourists is just basic burgers, pizza, comfort of chairs. You know, that's just not the way the world should work. And so I don't think there is a balance.
That's an interesting point. You know, having traveled around the world, I think about a recent vacation I took to Greece, to Santorini, and there's way more beaches in Santorini than there are here in the territory. So I think we're also limited by the amount of beach options that we have. And Megan's is marketed so heavily. It's, you know, viewed as one of the top 10 beaches in the world, et cetera, et cetera. Its notoriety goes beyond our shores. I think it's almost the go-to place when you're on a cruise ship, that the cruise ships are telling, hey, Megan's Bay is where you gotta go if you wanna go to the beach. So there's that dynamic at play as well. But I heard everyone and what they said, and I think that it goes back to what Dr. Isanison said, the intent and how we got the beach in the first place. And while I don't think a beach could belong to anybody, and that's a different discussion for a different time, Mr. Fairchild was explicit in what he said, and you even went a little bit further in what we shared in the piece with his intent. And so I hope that the voices of the people are heard and that there are accommodations made. The Cokie Point contrast is a very interesting one. I've seen that at play as well. You know, have a young man or a young woman that accommodates a tourist. I, as a tourist, would appreciate that. And like I said, you know, even in Santorini, it's all laid out. Like, you go, you rent, it's boom, it's very commercialized. But that's what they're marketing. We don't necessarily have to be that way. Now I'm going to lean on your legal expertise and go to our third topic, which is about this quandary that has popped up. A very, very unique situation in which two jurors in former BVI Premier Andrew Foy's case came back to the judge. One even reached out to the defense attorneys in an unprecedented move and called them and said, we have a change of heart. Based on what I read in the Miami Herald, most legal minds have said they haven't actually heard of a situation like this, where they've changed their minds post-verdict. Let's talk from a legal perspective. Explain to our viewers, when a verdict is read and you're a criminal defense attorney, the process that takes place, the judge polling jurors to affirm the choice that has been made, and what all that means.
Okay, so what usually happens is once a jury is retired to deliberate, they deliberate for however long they do. In this particular case, I thought it was very fast, considering the charges. And then they send out a note to the judge to let the judge know that they have reached a verdict. The judge will then call the jury back in, and he or she will look at the verdict and hand it back to the foreperson. Some judges read the verdict if the foreperson does not want to. And then the foreperson will stand up and say, we, the jury, find the individual guilty or not guilty for all the charges. And they will read that entire, see that quote over and over for however many charges there are. And what will happen is the judge will ask, does any party want to poll the jury? as a criminal defense attorney, if the verdict is guilty, you always poll the jury. And when you poll the jury, each juror stands up and says to the judge asks, is this your true and perfect verdict? The juror says yay or nay. It is very rare for a juror to say nay. And so they will stand each 12 member of the panel up, and the panel member will say yay or nay. Once the polling is complete, the judge will typically thank the panel for their service and then discharge the jury. And I don't really know how to describe what a discharging is like, but it's almost like you are sealing a door.
Yeah.
It is exceedingly difficult to overturn a verdict in this way, and it is exceedingly rare. So as it stands with Foy's case, there's only 4 real exceptions to how you can overturn a verdict in this way. There has to be a mistake on the verdict form. There has to be some kind of extraneous prejudicial information. So if someone is using evidence outside of evidence that was presented in court, in the deliberations, saying things like, well, I know personally that he murdered this person and was convicted, something like that. If there is some kind of like bribery or some kind of pressure or influence on a jury member. And lastly, which is not in the rules, but the Supreme Court has ruled, racial bias or racial animus being the reason. So they would have to be back there using some really derogatory language about Foy and saying that that's the reason why they found him guilty. Shy of those 4 exceptions, it is the defense is in an uphill battle. So what the defense is doing in this case right now is they're taking it step by step. First, they're saying, just repoll these 2 individuals. They're not even asking to do an investigation. They're saying, repoll them. Once the judge repolls them, then they're saying, then we can come back and think about other pathways. And so, juror remorse is not a basis.
That's what I'm wondering here, because based on what I've read, it's like you said, the door on the ark has been sealed and it's starting to rain outside. It's done. You can't get in, you can't get out. If that is the case, to me, the announcement that the judge is now bringing the jurors back to court on March 7th, even that seems extreme to me, because I've seen other cases where jurors end up, although they're advised not to, they end up getting money for interviews, they end up on TV, and sometimes there's a little bit of, I could have seen it going another way, but, in the jury room, the evidence really convinced me, blah, blah, blah. In this case, it is, for the jurors are explicitly saying, we change our mind.
Yes.
And this is like really legal no man's land. And the fact that now the judge is actually taking this up is shocking to me. Why do you think that's the case?
Because the defense was really creative in this particular situation. So what the defense is trying to argue, the rule that deals with this jury verdict is 606B. It's a federal rule of evidence. And so they're saying there is no case law regarding to the rule 606B in relation to a mandatory minimum sentence.
Okay.
And Foy is facing a 10-year mandatory minimum sentence on count 1.
Yes.
And so they have found a niche to try and get this before the judge and try to get the judge to somehow repool the jury or do investigation. And I want to be clear, the judge has like wide discretion, wide latitude. The judge could bring the jurors in and just begin to just question them. They also cited to another Florida rule, which I thought was very creative. It's Rule 11 that says that any counsel or any party can approach a jury with the permission from the court to interview and see if there was any misconduct. And so the government is saying no, they're trying to do a fishing expedition, and defense is saying no, if there's not unanimity in the jury verdict, it shouldn't stand. And they're not even looking to throw out the whole verdict. I think they're really trying to get to that count one, right? Because the count one is the mandatory minimum count.
We heard from the real attorney. Let's ask the street attorneys here. Have you paid attention, Dr. Isanison, to the case at all?
I know about the case. I haven't listened to all the details. To be honest with you, I'd really like to talk more about Magens Bay rather than about Foy and his problems, because to me that's an issue that's more important to us here in the Virgin Islands right now.
Well, what didn't we cover with Magens that you'd like to bring up? I'll give you that.
I want to talk some more about the boats, the yachts that moor and anchor on the beach. Because, over the course of the years, there's been a mooring plan that allows for boats to be moored in all our waters. One of the things I want to see happen is maybe an exemption being made for Magens Bay. Yes, you can have mooring, whatever the law says, but Magens Bay, because of the way it was established for the people, I think that there can be an exception made. And maybe at this point, our Legislative Committee on Conservation, or whatever it's called, needs to have a hearing that brings in DPNR, because one of the problems that we're experiencing is that there's no enforcement on the beach.
Yes.
The Magens Bay Authority says that they're allowing a certain number of moorings, 12 moorings, 9 for day use and 3 overnight. The people overnight, we don't know where they're dumping their stuff, and that we have to swim in that water. So I want to see DPNR, the Coast Guard, whoever else has responsibility, doing their job, policing the beach, making sure that you don't have 75 boats like somebody saw, all docked up, anchored, moored, whatever, on Magens Bay. It's also encroaching on the local fishermen who, use the beach to catch fish for people to eat. So, there are some issues that we really need to pay attention to in terms of making sure that the area is policed. And I want to see no anchoring, no mooring. I really don't want any boats there, because you've got people with jet skis and things speeding up and down, and they're encroaching on the swimming area. They're putting people's lives at risk. So it's not just a matter of beauty or whatever, it's a matter of safety. And so it's time for us to look for any exemptions that will keep Magens Bay from being a part of this conglomerate that allows for all the ugliness that we cater to because we're trying to make money from tourists. We've all been tourists. And when you go to some place, you want to buy into what the people of the place are into. I go to a place because I want to see something different. I don't want to force my way on top of them. I know I'm not going to find fry old wife when I go to certain places. I'm not going to find a saltfish pate when I go to
fry old wife in Greece, believe it or
good.
not.
In some other places, But I will go and try what they, whatever it is they have. We should not be catering to the people who want what they left at home. You're coming to this is our home. And I think that's part of the problem. This is our home. It's not America's playground like the license plates used to say once upon a time. This is our home. People live here. We earn our living here. And whatever is done should be done to cater to the people of the Virgin Islands. Let the tourists come and enjoy what it is we do and look at us and say, oh, I'd like to be a part of this.
Excellent. And I appreciate you advocating for your point. That's why we had you here on the show. Mr. Thomas, real quickly, any thoughts on the BVI premier's situation and the legal quagmire they find themselves in Florida?
The only thing I could say to that is always interested in living and being able to witness history in real time. So I just look forward to see how this plays out.
Do you think, Attorney Turnbull, there's a chance for a mistrial in this situation?
I don't. And I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I mean, the idea of, jurors coming and changing their mind for a guilty verdict really excites me.
Of course.
It excites me. But the case law is really against the defense in this particular case. They have not identified anything that is within the exception to get them outside of 606B. And so I don't foresee it. I don't foresee it.
Well, I got to tell you, you did a fantastic job in helping our viewers and me understand the legal technicalities of what's going on. And I'm sure everybody is going to be glued to the decisions that come out of Florida in this regard. And like Mr. Thomas said, it's an opportunity for us all to witness history, because we're seeing something that really has never been seen before in at least that's recorded American jurisprudence. So Thank you all for coming on the show. I appreciate you being well-researched and prepared. This is what we try to bring to the people of the territory on the show. And that's all we have for you today. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for an all-new episode of Comes with the Territory. But in the meantime, for your news updates, tune into WTJX's news feed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Leslie Camisian for all of us here at WTJX Channel 12. Have a great Sunday.